Hello and welcome to Need to Know. Making sure that children progress has always, understandably, preoccupied both teachers and politicians. But there's more than one way to assess, report and encourage progress amongst children. The question is, which is the most effective way to do it? In this programme, we're looking at the Making Good Progress pilot scheme, which is being trialled in over 450 schools across 10 different local authorities.
Well, as I see it, we're all here to help children make good progress, and that's what most schools are doing. And what the Making Good Progress pilot has given us is the tools to support that.
The Making Good Progress pilot has several components, ranging from assessment for learning to single-level tests. But before we start to unpack these, let's take an overview. And to help with that, I'm joined by Sue Hackman, the Government's Chief Advisor for School Standards. So, welcome, Sue. Now, given that Making Good Progress is still only a pilot, what do teachers really need to know at the moment about it?
It's about making sure that all children fulfil the potential that they've shown they have. It's about one-to-one tuition, it's about tracking pupils, it's about doing something about it if children fall off their trajectory of improvement. That simple. So
let's look at the 5 components of Making Good Progress in turn, starting with assessment for learning. Now this involves teachers tracking pupils' progress in much more detail than usual in reading, writing and maths. The idea is that they should then know exactly where each pupil is with their learning and be able to shape the next steps accordingly. But is it working?
We've made good use here of the Assessing Pupil Progress materials, certainly in maths and English, and I think anything which helps teachers understand exactly where a child is and then plan learning activities that will take them to the next stage is really important.
So some positive views there on assessment for learning. But some schools say they've really been doing this sort of assessment to assess children's progress for years, and there's nothing magical or new about it.
I think what is new about APP, or Assessing Pupil Progress, the exact scheme that we use, is that it standardises judgment across all teachers and schools by providing criteria so that we're not just depending on teachers' impressions. It gives criteria against which you can decide what level is a child at, or even what sub-level is a child at.
What the APP sheets do is they put it all together, they simplify it, and it's something that then everyone uses. It's not something that's been created by a different local authority and you've managed to find it on the internet. It's something that everyone uses, so we know that children are being judged equally and fairly no matter where they are.
Now, the second component of Making Good Progress is the offer of one-to-one help for children at risk of falling behind. This involves offering up to 10 hours of one-to-one tuition in English or maths for up to 10% of pupils in the cohort. This will be aimed at pupils who are below the expected levels as they enter the key stage or who appear to be stuck and making no progress.
It's primarily for pupils who arrive in the key stage already behind and who, despite our best efforts in the classroom, just aren't catching up. There's also a smaller number of pupils who do arrive at national expectations, but who do fall behind during the key stage, and it addresses those too.
When I fall out with a friend, I make up by sometimes making a joke of it. It really means that the child gets a bit of additional help, which is focused and targeted according to what their teacher feels they need, and which really supports what they're doing in class and helps them to move on.
At the moment, we do know that the vast majority of children have made really good progress. Some of them have made exceptional progress in that time, a whole year's worth, and about 1 in 10 of them have been making more than that. So it's early days, but we are very optimistic about the early results.
So that is assessment for learning and one-to-one tuition. What about the third component of Making Good Progress, single-level tests? The defining aspects of single-level tests are testing only when the teacher thinks a pupil is ready, regardless of age, shorter and more appropriately targeted tests, and, as the name implies, tests which are set at a single level within the national curriculum system, from levels 3 to 8. So Sue, how will a teacher know what level of test to put their pupils in for?
The teacher will decide when the child is ready to be put in for the next test, when they're working well within a level. And so our hope and expectation is that most children will do well in the tests and pass the test because they're already working at that level.
Is there a limit to how often children can be put in for these tests?
No, there isn't, but that's a good question, because what we don't want is that children are put in again and again and again for an inappropriate test. And indeed, if you are putting children in again and again, I think probably the sign there is that the assessment might be wrong in the first place.
The other important aspects of single level tests are that they are externally set and marked, providing an external validation of the teacher's judgment of pupils' work. They're a one-way ratchet, ever forwards, never back. And of course, they will be used to make schools accountable.
It does look like it. What are you trying to put in there? In any given year, as I understand it, a child could get to the point where you could test them for level 4. At the end of that year, if the child gets to level 5, I'm assuming we test them for level 5. So I think the only thing that worries me slightly is if that's accurate, are we going to be testing a child even more? And I think that's the bit that I'm not clear about. Tell me something, when you chose these names.
Well, we expect pupils to make 2 levels of progress during the key stage. So they might expect to go through 2 rounds of tests in a key stage. Slower moving pupils, perhaps children with special educational needs, because they move slower, would sit fewer tests actually. The reverse would be true about able pupils who might fly through the levels, and we're just wondering there whether, like music examinations, whether we might give children who are moving quickly the opportunity to miss out a level and just move on to the next one.
Isn't there a danger? We already know that there's some tendency to teach towards the test, but if children are doing a single level test, a narrower range of things, isn't there an even greater danger that narrowing of the teaching will happen?
The intentions are exactly the opposite, is to take some of the stress out of the test so that the tests become a confirmation of the teacher's assessment rather than the only way of knowing how a child is doing.
You might think that removing the end of key stage test removes that pressure on teachers to drive children to the next level, and that only testing children when they're ready means that teachers can become quite complacent. But I've found actually that the assessment aspects, the teacher assessment aspects of the Making Good Progress pilot have really led to an increased focus on target setting and moving children on, and that's where the pressure comes from. It comes from the curriculum as opposed to from the test. And that's been a real improvement that I've noticed being part of the pilot.
Sue, aren't we seeing that the tide is turning against national testing? We've seen the end of the Key Stage 3 tests. So is the government right to be pressing on with these single level tests at this time?
Yes, I think we've got to carry on developing assessment. It's not at the moment strong enough to say we have a good enough system in place, we know how all our children are doing and all our children are on trajectory. They're not. So no, I think we carry on developing. There is an expert group now meeting, we'll start reporting in the spring and in the summer, looking across the range of assessment activities, testing and accountability measures to give us some new ideas about where we go and perhaps a more coherent and slimmed down system.
Now, Sue, the national results for the 2007-2008 single level tests were not published because ministers said that they were actually flawed. Have those flaws been put right?
The flaws mainly occurred in Key Stage 3, and as you know, we've discontinued the single level test in Key Stage 3, so I suppose in that sense we've got round that problem. In Key Stage 2, the results look plausible and strong, but QCA, rather than us, decided that we couldn't use the results.
Let's look now at the 4th component of making good progress, progression targets. At both primary and secondary level, there's been a particular focus on speeding up the progress of the underperforming child. So in the pilot, schools have been given performance targets to increase the number of pupils making at least 2 levels of progress within a stated time frame.
Progression targets work by measuring the number of children, the percentage of children in the school that make 2 levels of progress in a key stage. Every 4% is 1 child. in a typical classroom. And in fact, in the first year of the Making Good Progress pilot, we set 4% as the a flat rate target for all schools. And the thinking there was that 4% is one child in 25. So it's the least you can ask of a single teacher, is one more child in every class makes 2 levels of progress. It didn't seem like too much to ask.
It's not something that we have found as a school motivating. It's very difficult to understand the formula by which the progression targets are worked out. Last year, because we had 100% of children making their 2 levels progress, it was impossible to set the required targets. We would have had to have set targets for 104%. So I do find the progression target can be slightly silly.
So interesting concern there that if a school is already getting all of its pupils making the right amount of progress, how can they get any better?
They're doing exactly what we want. They're getting all their children making fantastic rates of progress, and they will be rewarded appropriately.
Well, that brings us to the final element of making good progress, the progression premium.
It's about an incentive to reach those children who are the hardest to reach and to reward schools that do a good job with those children. There are rewards for every child that comes from behind and makes 2 levels of progress. But there's an extra award, around £300 per pupil, where a school adds to the number of pupils who are doing that.
As a school that's been part of the pilot for a year, I don't know yet whether we've received any money, what money we have received, I don't know what money to expect, and frankly I'm not motivated by it.
Well, rewarding schools for success will have a short-term benefit, I expect, and everyone can always use more money, hopefully wisely. The trouble is the interventions need to be in the schools that aren't being successful, and interventions do cost money, so I would be a bit worried about that as a general policy.
So interesting concern there. So far, I know the pilot's still going on, but how successful would you say it's been?
I'm absolutely certain sitting here now that one-to-one tuition has been a really new successful development. I know now sitting here that assessing pupil progress is almost a hallmark of every school that makes great progress. But the other things, I think we must complete the pilot. There's always this huge desire to roll things out, and I think we have to restrain ourselves until we know that it works.
So you can decide, can't you? Harry's quite right, because you've got to look at your substance and decide if it's dissolved.
When new government initiatives come on board, we assess them. If we feel that it's going to make a difference in a very positive and proactive way, we'll go the whole way with it. If we feel that actually it's not a labour of love, but just a labour, then we won't play.
And can you give us some idea of when that timescale will be, when that decision might be taken?
I would think by the end of the year in 2009, we will know either what we're rolling out or what we intend to continue piloting.
Well, that brings us to the end of the Need to Know programme about making good progress. My thanks to Sue Hackman and everyone else involved in the programme for helping us, I hope, to make good progress in our understanding of this new approach. Goodbye.